Good afternoon, I'm Judy Simpson. We're glad you're with us for a special occasion. Today is the 63rd birthday of Across the Fence. With your support and interest and the commitment of UVM Extension and WCAX-TV, this is the longest-running program of its kind in the country. Since our debut in 1955, there have now been more than 16,000 episodes. One of the only remaining tangible signs from the early years of Across the Fence is this memorandum. It was written by the founder of WCAX-TV, Stuart Martin. It authorized the launch of Across the Fence beginning February 14, 1955. For nearly 30 years, the program would air live, and so there's virtually no archive. All that remains are a few photographs, like this one, showing a farmer bringing a horse into the TV studio, marching right past the office secretary. There are some additional photos and slides that help trace the history of Across the Fence, but the real story of Across the Fence can be found in the people, beginning with the Martin family, which brought television to Vermont.
The reason there's an Across the Fence is it was part of the original agreement with the university, from whom we lease land on Mount Mansfield. And in the original lease agreement was the provision that we would run a program, which turned out to be Across the Fence. That provision has long since fallen out of the lease. So it continues because the university and we agree that this is a worthwhile endeavor.
In 2017, the Martin family sold WCAX-TV, but the new owners remain equally committed to Across the Fence. Now, viewers of this program will want to know, will you be keeping Across the Fence?
Yes, yes. This is the shows like Across the Fence are the reason that I personally got into television. Like the idea of telling stories, painting your television screen with beautiful images and color and maybe interesting ideas. That is sort of the greatest promise of television. And you know, I can't say that I or any other entity has lived up to that promise consistently, but certainly. This is a very important piece of why local broadcasting is important, because it is important that I live here. Mm-hmm. It is important that we do something together, like this idea of a shared experience. Think about our world right now. There are very few shared experiences left. Used to be, we could all talk about, you know, oh, did you see MASH last night? Oh, did you, boy, Cheers was hilarious. Friends, you know, like all these shows that we could connect over. These were experiences we could have together. And local broadcasting creates that. And that's something that we need to sort of shepherd as we move into a new world.
As Across the Fence celebrates 63 years, it's fun to see and hear the various looks and themes that the program has had over the years.
The Extension Service of the University of Vermont presents your daily farm and home program, Across the Fence.
The Extension Service and the Experiment Station of the University of Vermont present your daily farm and home program, Across the Fence.
The Extension Service and Experiment Station of the University of Vermont present your daily farm and home program, Across the Fence. The Extension Service and Experiment Station of the University of Vermont present your daily farm and home program, Across the Fence.
And I have to add that it has been my pleasure and a whole lot of fun to be the latest host of Across the Fence. I really do learn something new every day, and I look forward to sharing all this great programming with you. For our next segment, we look back at some additional Vermont history. It's definitely been a cold year so far, but this is nothing compared to Vermont in the year 1816. Let's join photographer Keith Silva and Vermont historian Howard Coffin.
The United Church of Bethel, right here smack in the middle of Bethel, Vermont, it was built to last. Built of brick, made in a yard just down the street. In the basement is Bethel white, the whitest granite in the world, and it has lasted. This church came into being in what may have been the darkest, coldest year in the history of Vermont. It was known as 1800 and froze to death. No one could have seen what was coming in the winter of 1815 and 16. It was an unusually mild winter, followed by a mild Vermont spring, and summer was coming on nicely, until the night of June 5th and 6th, when a mighty snow touched the land, and within 3 days, snowdrifts were as much as 3 feet deep, and the first crops were beginning to die. The awful year had begun. In July, there were frosts and more snow. In August, in Middlebury, the temperature suddenly went up to 90 degrees and then plummeted below freezing, and a great drought set in. It became so dry that forest fires broke out in the Adirondacks. The smoke drifted across the lake to Burlington, and visibility there was only a few feet at times. In September, the cold persisted, and October began with a foot of snow. The catastrophe was not only in Vermont. It was nearly apparently worldwide. We now know that a great volcano had erupted in the Pacific and spread a great cloud of ash all around the world. In Europe, the writers Lord Byron and Mary Shelley had planned to spend a happy summer in Switzerland in the Alps writing happy things. But the clouds descended, the cold came on, and Mary Shelley went indoors to write a novel called Frankenstein. The result of this winter without a summer, as some called it, others called it the starvation year, eventually would mean that up to 15,000 Vermonters would pick up and leave. Among those who left Vermont was a family from Norwich renting a farmhouse down there named Smith. They took with them their son Joseph and went to Western New York State. He, of course, would found the Mormon religion. Most people stayed, and many became part of a religious revival. Of course, the darkness and cold brought fear. O Lord, our help in ages past. People flocked to the churches, and of course, they built a new one in Bethel. When the year finally ended, this church had been dedicated on Christmas Eve. With the coming of the new year, something strange happened in Vermont. St. Elmo's fire came from the skies, and the fence posts and trees and church steeples and even people's hair had a great glow about it. What was it? What was this mystery? The mystery deepened, but finally, with spring, came a normal summer, and Vermont's 1800 and froze to death became a well-remembered history.
And we raise our glasses of the mulled winter wine with a toast.
On this Sunday morning, the congregation of the United Church of Bethel is welcoming in the Christmas season. Decorations are going up and the choir is in good voice. The history of the church has been chronicled by a longtime resident, a member of this community, and someone I'm proud to call a friend. Janet Burnham, historian, author, and deacon of the United Church of Bethel. We're here in her historic home, which I understand to be the oldest house in Bethel Village, and it has something to do, very much to do, with the religious history of this village. Janet.
That's true. And it's not I don't believe it's the oldest house entirely in Bethel, but the oldest one in the village, as you said. And it was 37 years before they built a church here in town. So before that, they had visiting ministers and so on and so forth, and they had to have it in barns or fields or houses, and this particular room, which they called the Four-Square Room, was a place that they often held a church service.
So church services were held right here.
Yes, right here.
And if memory serves me, there was a rather famous preacher who would have preached here.
Yes, that was Hosea Ballou, who was probably the most influential preacher to forward the thinking about universalism.
Do you think there's a connection between the weather and the building of the church?
Absolutely, had to be. They said that, historians say that between 10 and 15,000 people packed up and left Vermont.
It could be the world was ending, perhaps.
Absolutely. The end times, like it said in the Bible, the end times. And they would have no way of knowing then that a volcano half a world away was causing the weather to act peculiarly.
Today, as we begin this celebration of 200 years in this building, what it was
Sunday service at places of worship like the United Church of Bethel brings people together.
How important are these churches to our communities? They're extremely important in the terms that they have been the anchors of our community since the earliest days. They are built at the head of our towns on a hill at the head of the green. They are part and parcel of what a Vermont village is all about. They were the center of village life as meeting houses and places to congregate for all sorts of things that have kind of fallen by the wayside due to modern society. However, they still remain extremely important because even in a state that is the least churched in the nation, they have a place. They have a place in our lives and in the fabric of our communities. For what do we do for weddings if we don't have them? What do we do with our dead if we don't have a church to carry them to and from to our churchyards and honor them? What do we do if we do not have these places to come to in times of crisis, both nationally and internationally? When we have a local tragedy, it is the place where we still gather. When we mourn a local person, it's the place where we come to share our community's grief and begin to do that healing. If we ever lose these places, we have lost the soul of Vermont. We meet people where they are. On our bulletin, it says you are welcome here. Whoever you are, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. We mean that. We truly mean that. And I think that if you meet people where they are, if you don't take yourself too seriously, if you try and explain each and every week some tiny way that people can take the lesson they've heard and not just listen to it as some theoretical thing, but to take that piece of theology into their lives throughout the week, that we give them something to look forward to, something to practice, if you will, in their lives, and something that bonds them together with others in a family. And church is very much a family. So I think meeting people where they are, meeting their needs on a day-to-day basis, and not trying to be something that we aren't, speaks a lot for us. We're more like a diner than a five-star restaurant. I tell people, if you don't like organized religion, you've come to the right place, because this is disorganized religion at its finest. Yeah. Nice to see you.
In 2016, a Vermont State Historic Marker will be dedicated on the front lawn of this church. This grand old building will become the official place of remembrance for the year Vermont nearly froze to death. In Bethel, I'm Howard Coffin for Across the Fence.
Our thanks to Howard for all of his excellent work, and thanks to you for joining us and helping to celebrate our 63rd birthday. I'm Judy Simpson. I'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.